Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Diamond Hands podcast. Today, we have a guest that flew out all the way from Las Vegas. I mean, he was here for something else. But anyways, we have Adam Haroun. He is the CEO and founder of Aesthetics Altitude, and he's been in business for 12 years. And so he is really the expert on helping you to never discount, okay? And because what we know in the aesthetics industry, many times it's a race to the bottom, right? And that is something, especially in this AI age, that being a commodity is not going to be the way to win. Standing out and showing how you're different is, and he's an expert at that. So we're going to be getting into that today. So welcome.
Thank you for having me, Leslie. This is going to be so much fun.
No, I'm so excited. So, yeah, so, first of all, I always love to kind of find out a little bit of history,
Yeah.
So let's go back to the beginning. So tell us a little bit about you, growing up in Canada. What drew you to the aesthetics industry? Because as a luxury strategist, you could have chosen any industry to go into.
Yeah.
But why aesthetics?
Yeah, absolutely. So my interesting kind of story is like I didn't start off like working for a practice. I started off as a patient actually, and I was in my early 20s at the time. Running around Toronto doing this branding stuff for private equity firms and construction firms and you name it. And I was looking worse for the wear, right? And so I was looking for some under eye treatments at the time. And as I was going on consults and here and there, and I was like, oh, all these clinics have like really bad marketing. Like I can really help these people. So started learning everything I could about the industry, referred out all my other clients, really from 2014 onwards I've been in this space and just grown ever since, and seen marketing evolve along the way. So I started off as a patient who just saw clinics that needed the kind of help I can give.
Exactly. And so, and I love to ask this. So you knew what you saw wrong in the industry was that, okay, marketing was sucking. People were commoditizing themselves. So like, if you want to tell us, like, what is the why you do it now? Like what's your deep why? Like, what do you feel when you work with these practices?
Yeah, it's all about raising standards. And I would even say underpinning that is patient safety, right? Because I think so many clinicians, you and I were media people. Like, you can get on camera like it's nothing, right? But so many clinicians are like, I don't want to get on camera. I don't want to market myself. I don't want this, that, the other. And to me, all this marketing stuff, like growing your business is kind of just like the byproduct of that, right? More than anything, it's really about patient advocacy. And if you're not good at marketing, if you're not good at selling, if you're not good at putting yourself out there, who else are patients hearing from? At best, they're hearing from a less skilled clinician. At worst, they're going to go somewhere and end up in serious trouble, right? So for me, it's all about empowering practices to really raise their standards, thereby advocate more effectively for their patients, and make sure people don't get hurt in this industry. I mean, we see headlines every week of people where this horrible thing happened or that person got arrested for something awful, and we don't need that. It gives our industry a bad name. So more than anything, it's about helping my clients be of service to their patients and keep the general public safe.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's a very important thing because that whole entire patient experience journey, right? So let's talk about that a little bit because, because a lot of our listeners are a little bit newer or what have you. And, so tell us a little bit about what can someone do to make sure their patient experience journey is something that's safe, but also high end and also attracting the right patients from the very beginning when they're just trying to figure out how to get their first 5 patients.
Yeah. So I think the first thing, especially if someone would be newer in the aesthetic medicine world to understand, is the patient journey doesn't begin when someone walks through your doors. It actually starts a lot earlier than that. It starts the minute they hear the name of your practice, right? When they're finding you on Instagram, when they're finding you on Google, wherever they happen to be finding your practice, everything starts there. Is your website looking the part? Is your social media looking the part? Do you have a robust online review presence? If not, how do we amplify that? So I think first, just understanding the journey begins a lot earlier on than people might think. That would be my first piece of advice. From there, if you're newer in aesthetic medicine, you've actually got a really great advantage in the sense that you've got a clean slate to work with, right? Versus maybe you're a practice that's been at this for 4, 5, 10 years and like we have to try and fix a mess. So don't think being new is a disadvantage and creating an experience. It's actually a huge advantage. That being said, like I always say, think about being your own most scrutinizing secret shopper, right? Every little detail down to like, do the staff wear name badges? Do they not? Do they all have the same uniforms? What do those uniforms look like, right? Is there a signature sent to the practice? Like really audit every little detail. And you need to think not of yourself just as, being a clinic or a medical practice. You absolutely are, and that matters, but really we're in the world of retail medicine, right? You as a practice owner, you have a lifestyle brand, whether you realize it or not. And so look at these lifestyle brands that you maybe admire. Maybe it's the Ritz-Carlton. Maybe it is a fashion or jewelry brand that you really like. And think about all the little things they do to really create that experience for their clientele. That's the level of experience you want to engineer from day one. And the great news is a lot of that doesn't have to be very expensive. Offering a patient in the treatment room a choice of what kind of music they would like, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't cost anything. Maybe you have a choice of scents that people can have during their treatment with your esthetician.
Yeah.
Or if someone's allergy sensitive, maybe you have a specific unscented room that's especially, intended for those people with allergies. So just doing that little bit of extra thinking about how you can make the patient feel heard and personalize that experience for every one of them, that is a great place to start.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100%. And something else that I want to ask you, because I love to look at things from like the level of identity, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, at the end of the day, like some people are trying to do things that are a complete dichotomy to who they actually are.
Absolutely.
They're like, I live on a farm and I love this and I'm very like, hunky-dory.
Yeah.
But yet I'm trying to create a Chanel experience that's not even
Yeah.
what I am.
Yeah.
So can we talk about, what people need to have on the inside to even put that forth into the world?
Yeah, I think the first thing a practitioner needs is conviction, right? You have to be confident in your skill set and what can you provide to your patients. If you're not at that level yet, don't feel bad. Let's get you some skills and training to make sure you do begin to feel that, right? So that's number one, is have conviction in what it is you do for patients. Number two is understand, people say, oh, Adam, he's about luxury marketing and marketing to the affluent and all this. And that's true, but that doesn't look the same from one practice to the next, right?
Yeah.
Like a practice I work with in rural Texas, like luxury there is going to look way different than how it might look for a client, in Malibu or in Beverly Hills, right? So understand, luxury doesn't mean necessarily like pictures of everyone in like fur coats and a marble waterfall in the reception area. In fact, to a lot of patients, that's really daunting and off-putting. What luxury means is whatever your patients are looking for, you're able to deliver the best of that in a way that's authentic to who you are as a practitioner and to your practice team.
Yes. And I know that I'm not sure if you've ever read any, I love to read like Katfer's book on luxury strategy or have you, and it's like, yeah, of course but I know that there's a differentiation between premium and luxury.
Absolutely.
And those are not the same. And I think sometimes people want it to be luxury when they actually want to be premium.
Yeah.
And so can we talk about those differences in your mind between a luxury positioning and a premium positioning? Because luxury, by the way, it is because you run a luxury business, right?
Yep.
Because you're very much like referral only, atelier.
Yep.
Keep it small. You're not trying to work with 500 million practices, right? And we both know people that are like, I want to work at every practice in the world. No, honey, it's okay. But can we talk about that positioning between premium and luxury?
Totally. So if I look at like the luxury strategy, that is where you are marketing on what makes you a category of one. Those elements that can't be compared. You've probably developed your own way of doing treatments and your own unique way to assessing a patient's facial anatomy or assessing their body. So it's really those distinguishing factors that really are kind of underpinning a luxury strategy. When we think premium, that's where someone's getting the most value for their beauty investment, right? And by the way, most value for their investment and lowest price, like those are not the same thing, right? So they work together, but they are distinct strategies. I think a great example of this, I like to look at the fashion world, right?
Yeah.
Think of like Armani, right? So there's Armani Privé. That's truly their luxury element, right? That's where that's like the $25,000 garment, gracing the red carpet, walking down the runway every season, all of that, right? That's designed for like a very select few.
Yeah.
Then they've got, Giorgio Armani, still premium. You're paying, $5,000, $10,000 for a suit, still luxury in every sense of the word, but it really is designed for more of a broad audience, right? And then even further from that, we have their diffusion offering, right? Which is Armani Exchange, still quality, but in a way that's really, really accessible and that really appeals to maybe more of a mass market than their other elements do. So I always think of it that way. Also understand it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. You might have certain things in your practice that are your luxury offerings, your multi-$1,000 treatments. If you're a surgical practice, certain surgical things you're doing, then you probably have things like, your neuromodulators and maybe some of your wellness programs and things like that are really kind of your more premium offering, right? And then maybe things like your introductory services, like your facials or esthetician services, that might be more of like your diffusion. So it's not an either or, but premium and luxury work hand in hand, but they are in fact different. So there you go.
Well, yeah, definitely. Because it's like when you go to, for example, with Hermes, you have to be invited to get a bag.
Exactly. Yep.
I don't have one. No, I don't want one. I don't like Hermes.
There you go.
But I think they're a beautiful brand. But even like their strategy, it's like you have to be invited to get that.
Yep.
But can you go and walk in off the street and get a little scarf? Yes, you can.
Get a little plate. I have many. Yes.
Exactly. A little plate, a little something. And that's what we were talking about. So I love how you say it's just like you can have a kind of like, core position. For Chanel, for example, she only dressed a certain type of person in the very beginning, right? And then she was like, okay, I'm going to stretch my brand a little bit and I'm going to get my number 5, perfume in here,
Yep.
so then other people who don't have access
Exactly.
to the top echelon
Mhm.
can get a little taste.
Exactly.
And that's why we see, even in like the luxury market or whatever, it's like people go to Sephora, all these places,
Yeah.
and snapping up the little Chanel lipsticks and
Mhm.
at Macy's or Nordstrom's,
Absolutely.
snapping up because they want a piece of the dream.
And next to that $15,000 handbag, well,
Mhm.
$60 for a simple lipstick isn't so bad after all,
Exactly,
right? So,
right? And so, okay, so I know a part of luxury strategy, of course, is like selling the dream
Yeah.
and also separating,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That separation, because if you don't have a dream
Yeah.
to sell someone, it's not really a luxury strategy. So,
Absolutely.
for example, like we were talking about, I keep talking about Hermes, right?
We love Hermes.
But for people who love that brand, they want to be invited, if they have the money for it,
Absolutely.
the diamond snakeskin bag or whatever
Yep.
it is.
Yep.
They want to be invited to that.
Mm-hmm.
But if they see someone on the street wearing, everybody using the same bag, they're going to be like, I don't
Yeah.
want this anymore.
Exactly.
And that's why they also limit production. So
Mhm.
how can someone, if they are truly trying to go for a truly luxury strategy in their business, exclude people? Because exclusion,
Yep.
and we don't like to talk about this, but it's true, exclusion is a part of luxury. It doesn't go to get on the plane.
100%.
First class, they separate, they close it.
Yep.
Different services. You don't
Yeah.
even talk or associate. Don't even use the same bathroom as
Yeah.
people who are in coach.
Main I wouldn't even use that word. I just say main cabin with a shutter. Can't even use the C word. Gosh. So, I can't make this up.
That's crazy.
So that's a really great question. And again, I think the word exclusion comes with a lot of, emotional baggage for people. But
Yeah.
then it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? When we say exclusion in the context of marketing, it's about deciding who you're for and who you're not, right? Like,
Mhm.
think of the fitness industry, right? There is everything from an Equinox Fitness all the way down to a Planet Fitness, right?
Yep.
And the same treadmill, the same 20-pound dumbbell in both those fitness studios. But what separates those brands completely is the entire experience surrounding that, right? And it's not that one is a better brand than the other. It's not that one is a better set of customers than the other. It's just they're catering to different people, right? So
Mhm.
if you're that practice that's saying like, oh, well, our leads coming through like aren't the right group, or we're not having the kind of quality of patient we want walk through our doors, to
Mhm.
me, like that's kind of the hangover of bad market positioning
Mhm,
in the
mhm.
sense like somewhere along the way, whether it's your social media, your website, the offers you're running, or some combination of all of those is not telling people who you are and who you're not for, right?
Mhm.
And if you're someone like I said earlier that doesn't want to exclude anybody, well, great. Guess what's great news? If you run a luxury practice, it's wildly profitable. You can do pro bono things, right? You can do
Mhm.
things where you're doing things at no cost for the community. So it's not that you have to exclude people, but when you're a luxury brand, it affords you that margin and that profitability to do things from your heart and to help people if it's something you choose to pursue.
Yeah, yeah, and that's true. So, like, tell me more about some of the patients, because I have not patients that practices, because I've seen it sometimes where people, they don't charge enough for their services. They are excellent,
Mm-hmm.
practitioners of
Mm-hmm.
medicine, but they don't charge enough, and they find themselves running on kind of like a hamster wheel.
Yeah.
So tell me about how pricing properly actually helps you to deliver your best work and
Yeah.
then attract even better into your practice
Yeah.
over the long haul.
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest hesitations I talk to practices about when it's like it's time to raise your prices.
Mhm.
Oh, we can't raise our prices. We're going to lose patients, right?
Yeah,
But the
yeah.
reality is, if you're not priced properly right now or underpriced right now, you're losing patients as we speak because there's people in your market who want what you have to offer, that are looking for the best. They
Mhm.
see your prices and think, oh, well, she or he can't be any good, right? So
Mm.
I think it's not that you lose patients by raising your prices. It's that you lose patients by not being priced high enough, number one.
Mhm, mhm.
Right. Number two, just to kind of go this whole idea of like, how do you really become that luxury and price accordingly? Again, really understand like what kind of a business do you want to run, right? If you need to see like 40 patients in a day to break even on your operating costs, like that's an exhausting business model. Even just thinking about that exhausts me.
Mhm.
Versus maybe you see 4 to 10 patients in a day who are paying you what you're worth, and all of a sudden you're less exhausted, your staff is less exhausted. At that level, those patients are very likely to refer because we know the affluent do business based on relationship and referral. And so I
Mhm.
think it's just a matter of understanding, the right pricing actually attracts people versus turning them away and losing them. And then really
Mhm.
asking yourself, like, what kind of a business do you want, right? I always say there's nothing wrong with being a high volume practice. I think it's exhausting and I'm not the person to help you build that. But at the same time, it is a business model that, is viable. Where no one should find themselves is in this middle, right? In 2026, the middle of the market is kind of extinct, right? Because here's what we see happening both in and out of aesthetic medicine, right?
Yeah.
We see consumers, higher earners versus those more modest incomes. That disparity is growing globally.
Yeah.
In every market you can think of, right? And so people are doing one of two things. They're either going to trade up to that luxury brand, commanding premium prices, and they're happy to either save, leverage credit, whatever they need to do to invest in those procedure fees, or they're going to trade down to that, Groupon, hamster wheel of discounts type of practice. And again, if you want to do that, knock yourself out. But like, that's just not what I would recommend.
Knock yourself out.
If you're that like, hey, I'm kind of in the middle. I'm not the cheapest, I'm not the most expensive. Well, no one's really looking for that in today's economic climate. They're going to go one of those two extremes, right?
Yeah, because it's almost like, guys, my background is in theology. My father's a pastor, as I told you before, so I got to bring it back to this.
I get you.
But it's just like, there is something in the Bible talks about, like, if you are I would rather you be hot or cold. If you're lukewarm, I spit you out. Right? And that's something from the Bible. But I think that's the same thing.
Absolutely.
So people want people who are passionate or who are just kind of like letting anything go. But the ones that are kind of in the middle, you don't get moved by them.
Yeah.
You don't feel that conviction.
No,
You're just
exactly.
like, okay, ho hum. You're the same as Tommy, Joe, Sally, Mary on the street. So it's almost like you just have to pick a side. And so if you're in the beginning, or even if you're looking for a rebrand for yourself, take some time to sit down and pick a side and say, what do I want to devote myself for the next 10 freaking years?
Yep. It's like, where would you buy a can of soup, right? You can buy a can of soup at Whole Foods. You can buy a can of soup at Kroger. You could buy a can of soup at Walmart if you want more economical. You could probably buy your soup at Dollar Tree. I don't know if there's real mushrooms in it, but you could, right? But what I am saying is, right, what end of the market do you want to serve as a practitioner? You need to decide that. And everything you do, from your pricing to your marketing to where you choose to market to your patient experience, all needs to align with that. And by the way, being luxury is not all, ponies and rainbows, right?
No.
Those patients are very discerning and often a lot more demanding than a more price-sensitive consumer. Again, that's not a bad thing as long as you know how to really meet and exceed those standards. So yeah, decide where you want to be and make sure everything from your marketing to your brand to where you promote yourself aligns with that.
Yeah, and so let's talk about, even going into, walk me through a brand breakdown, how it actually looks like from the inside, right? Not just like the symptoms the patients see on the top, but where does it look like at the staff level, the booking level, and where does that incoherence actually live before it surfaces publicly? Yeah.
So I always say there is no such thing as a neutral patient interaction. There's no such thing as a neutral patient interaction. Everything from the way your staff answer the phone to your online scheduling. Is that clunky? Is it good? Is it so-so? Like all those even most minuscule elements are either on the micro level, either building your brand or detracting from it. So like, again, be your own most like discerning secret shopper and audit every little thing along that journey for friction to see, is that something that could maybe lose a patient a bit along the way, or at the very minimum, dissuade them from saying yes and converting, right? So it begins with even something as simple as like your online scheduling. That can be something that makes or breaks your brand. Every single touch point matters.
It does. And like, even with this, okay, so I know there are opposing camps when it comes to putting down an investment before someone comes into the practice, right? So, okay, so practice that says, we're going to charge a $100 consultation fee for you, Joe Smo. We've never seen you before. Practice who says complimentary consultation, cancellation, but we're going to have to do a cancellation fee if you don't. Or practice that says, see, nothing, just book. And if you come, you come. If not, so let's talk about those three distinct and what they do in a patient's mind.
So, and by the way, I have practices I've worked with that do all three, right? With varying levels of success. So there's no one answer to this. But again, I think when you charge some kind of a consultation fee, even if it's only $1, I mean, ideally it's more than that, but you know what I'm saying? That immediately just creates that barrier that someone who's a complete tire kicker doesn't intend to book with you at all, they're just not going to schedule that consultation. So I am a big believer in the consultation fee. Now, if you are a brand new practice or you're introducing a new provider to the practice, there may be an introductory period where it's a complimentary consult or a period after you just opened your doors where it's complimentary, right? And that's going to depend on a very case-by-case basis. But I do like there being some kind of a consultation fee because I think it, kind of dissuades tire kickers. If, you're in certain markets, for example, I've worked in certain markets, all around Canada where just consult fees aren't something people generally do outside of the surgical space. And so it just doesn't really fly there. That's great, but we still get that credit card on file. So if they don't show, there is a fee levied.
Yeah.
That at least gives someone a barrier to encourage compliant client or patient behavior, right? So that to me is still not my ideal, but that's a little bit better because at least, you know, you're doing serious business. You can't even book a hotel room without putting a credit card on file, or a massage without booking a credit card on file, right? So even if you don't charge a consult fee, at least get the credit card number. If you're that practice that's like, no, we're not doing that, no credit card fee, no consult, none of that. That to me just kind of sets a bit of a precedent for, okay, well, where are you letting anything fly clinically? And where are you letting anything fly with other areas of your practice? So I'll be honest, I've never encouraged that. I just think that lends itself to a little bit of a chaotic practice. I mean, again, you know, if someone's getting a complimentary consult, you know, and they aren't willing to put their credit card down just for in case of a no-show, that's really, that person doesn't respect your time, right? You're a professional. No lawyer would ever go for that. You know, no accountant person would ever go for that. Like professionals either charge for their time or charge for missing and disrespecting their time. So yeah, if you're that practice or like, we don't take credit cards or don't charge a consult fee either, like I would just highly encourage you to get away from that. Even that alone will start to attract a higher caliber of patient.
Yeah, and like you said, it could be something small, $50.
Yeah.
Person will get upset about it if they are a tire kicker, but you have your $50 at least.
Yeah, and there's different options there, right? Maybe that's $50 that you credit towards treatment. I'm a big fan of that. Or even if you don't want to do that, if someone comes in and they don't say it's for them, maybe you offer them a retail product with a retail value of $50. So you can at least maybe they don't become a patient, but you flip them into a retail customer, right? So even if it's $50, you either credit or offer a retail product comparable value, just something to put your time as valuable.
Yeah.
I think makes a world of difference. And I'm of the school of thought, if someone's not willing to spend $50 on a consultation with a licensed and credentialed professional, how likely are they to, you know, invest in anything else you do?
Exactly. Because, you know, if you're building a brand that is going to be comprehensive, you're going to have a very comprehensive treatment plan that goes with the life cycle over that person's face or body, depending on how deep you go with someone over a course of a year.
Absolutely.
And they have to be serious about it. And it's like, you guys have gone to school for so many years for this. My sister's a doctor, and it's just like, respect. Right? And it's just like, when you've gone to school for that much, it's like showing that respect to yourself. Because I do find sometimes we just tend to have a disrespect for even our own time, you know, coming into business.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
And it's just like, sometimes I think we say we need to prove that we're something before we're able to do something, when who does it say? It's just like, you have to be before you are.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Right. Set a precedent. Couldn't agree more.
Set a precedent. And so I want to ask you, I know you have a framework that I really love, and I want to talk about that. Your 3 C's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about these. This is truly the holy grail of how you build a luxury brand. So the first C is really going to be consistency, right?
Yep.
Does your website look like inside your practice? Does that look like, you know, the, you know, business cards you hand out at community events, like that visual consistency? But just as importantly, if not more important, is consistency of experience. If they come in on a Tuesday at 1 in the afternoon or Saturday at 10 in the morning, regardless of who's working in the practice that day, is their experience consistent, right? If I look at a practice's online reviews and I see it's a little bit all over the place, half of them are like 5 stars, like you got to come here, best place ever, and the other half are like, this is the worst money I ever spent. That to me is a practice where somewhere along the way there's a really big consistency problem, right? And I start with consistency because that's the hardest one to get right in a lot of cases. The second one's going to be clarity. Like, do people know what you do and what you do well? Like, think about it, right? You see these practices on Instagram where 1 minute they're talking about like liposuction, and the next they're talking about like, oh, we do permanent lashes, and like the next minute they're like, oh, we have this energy healer that comes once a month. Oh, and by the way, we can do your weight loss shots too. And you're like, what does this place do well? There's nothing wrong with having a wide array of services, but not all those services need equal airtime in your marketing, right? Confused minds don't buy. So really find those 3 to 5 services that you want to hinge your social media presence on. That can be really beneficial as far as clarity goes, because what that is people know what you do and what makes you different. And then the third C is going to be constancy, right? You can't just be relying on referrals. You can't just be relying on word of mouth. You can't just be doing paid ads and SEO. Marketing is not one thing. Marketing is everything, right? So how are you leveraging all those channels together? That's going to make a world of difference to your overall conversion. So if you can master clarity, that people know what you do and makes you different. Consistency, that people have consistent visuals they can associate with your practice, and a consistent experience no matter where, when, who in the practice serves them. And then again, if that constancy where you're not relying on any one way of marketing, you will be in a much stronger place than like 95% of practices out there.
Oh yeah, 100%. And like even going in, and so along that line, so consistency, 100%. That's like table stakes.
Absolutely.
100%. And I think even beyond like, you know, the clarity, it's just like a declaration.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's just like, I don't care what you're doing down the street. I don't care what you're doing at the practice 5 blocks down, because that
Absolutely.
happens so much.
Yep.
It's declaring, this is what I stand
Absolutely.
for.
Yep.
Because, differentiation, I think, is getting a little bit harder now. And I just think it's more of like, I think what we're creating now, we're going back to almost like tribalism.
Right.
This is kind of where, what do you feel about that? Because I feel like we're kind of going to tribalism. It's like, this is what I believe.
Yep.
This is where I put my stake in the ground.
Yep.
Are you going to follow me into this thesis,
Yep.
in this way I see the world, or how I see aesthetics, or I see...
Absolutely. It's like you've cornered the market on you, right? Like, why would you try and be like the bootleg version of some other practice when you have so much of your own value to bring to the aesthetic industry? Yeah. And to your point, find your tribe. The right patients are going to resonate with you. We know at this point in time, as of today's recording, only about 8% of the US population is even getting aesthetic treatments right now. So when I hear people say, oh, well, Adam, the industry is saturated. I mean, if you're just like doom scrolling your competition on Instagram all day, that's how you're going to feel. But if you want to go into like an airport or Times Square and ask 20 people, are you getting aesthetic treatments? Like, how many of them would say yes? Maybe 1 or 2. So, there are markets in the world that are saturated. North America is not even close to being there yet.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge thing, what you said. And I love that. So let's map the patient journey together a little bit. Okay. And it's like, so in your experience, where is the biggest brand drop off point?
Yeah, and it kills me to say it. It's probably going to be your front of desk staff, or front of house, I should say, right? Because here's the thing. So often that is going to be the first human interaction the patient to be or existing patient has with the practice's brand. And if they don't know how to convert, don't know how to engage people in conversation, don't reflect the vocabulary and ambiance you want for your patients very well, that's going to leave that patient feeling underwhelmed at best, or choosing not to even pursue that consultation at worst, right? So I know a lot of people, they'll hire front desk staff from like the podiatrist's office, or like, like the, I don't know, some like, insurance-based practice, right? And that isn't my favorite place to hire from, because I think in the world of insurance-based medicine, like customer service, as much as it kills me to say it, doesn't really matter, right? It's just about like getting people through like a machine. Next. And whereas if you were to hire someone from a retail or a hospitality setting, right, they understand customer service and first impressions count. Like we said earlier, there's no such thing as a neutral interaction. One of my friends, Mara Shore, she says this super, super well. That front desk staff is your director of first impressions, right? They can blow it well before you even have a chance to see that patient. And I'm sure all of you listening have had this happen where like this patient comes to you, maybe didn't have the greatest experience with your front desk staff, and they're all flustered, but like you haven't even done anything with them clinically yet, or even talked to them yet. So I think that front desk position is really the unsung hero of every practice, and one that so many providers don't put enough emphasis on, A, in training them properly, B, in finding the right person to hire and really fill that role in the first place.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And even and to go further with that, I also even think compensation is a very big challenge, because people say, okay, we're going to have this person who's the director of first impressions, who's going to make or break our practice beyond clinical stuff. We're going to pay them minimum wage. And it's like, okay, I don't believe that's going to work for a long-term strategy. If that's what you need to do when you're just starting or something, you need to vision cast with that person and say, okay, this position, you have the ability to grow to here. These are the things I need to see here, here, here. But when the practice wins, you win. What are your goals? What are you excited about in life? Help me get here, because when a practice wins, guess what? I'm going to make sure you win too, Sally. Yeah. You have to paint that vision. If you could only pay minimum wage, that's when you start. Otherwise, it's like, sometimes I think it's just the bottom of the barrel.
Absolutely.
And it's not right.
And I think a lot of practices, when they're hiring front desk staff, kind of step over dollars to get to dimes. And what I mean by that is you're not thinking in the context of what the lifetime value of a patient is worth.
Oh, yeah.
And taking that even further, lifetime worth. That patient spend at your practice over their lifetime with you, and the value of all the referrals they can bring through your door, right? And when you think, and that can be hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions in the case of a surgical practice, right? And it's like, if that's what you know it's worth to acquire and keep a patient and get their referrals, pay the extra $5 to $6 an hour for the right person at your front of house. Like, it's going to make a world of difference.
It's a world difference. I went to a friend of mine, her 10-year anniversary, and it's just like, but there's one person two people she has in her practice that have been there for the 10 years.
Yeah.
Those are the backbones of the entire practice. And so the people coming to like, oh my goodness, we love this person.
Yep.
And she's kept that same core patient concierge there since she opened day
Absolutely.
one.
Absolutely.
So people went in and out around her, but because she was able to at least retain that
Yeah.
core person,
Yep.
that does something.
Yep. And, like we said earlier, the affluent are buying certainty, right? So seeing those same faces every time they come into your practice over years, you can't even put a price to that as far as I'm concerned, right?
yeah.
We've all been to that business, both in and out of our world of aesthetic medicine, where it's a revolving door of faces every time you walk in there and you're like, what's going on? Do they pay bad? Is this a bad person to work for? Like, what's the deal? Like, this doesn't make me feel pampered. Like, this is even a particularly good business, right?
Yes.
So there you go.
Yeah, because even part of that whole couturier type of environment, you go and you get fitted into your dress by the same person.
Yep.
They know your measurements. They know if you did something you shouldn't have.
Yeah, 100%.
They know how to talk to you. They anticipate your needs.
Yep.
And you can't do that when you have a revolving door of people.
Yep.
I remember when I used to be a manager of an optometry practice about 20 years ago. But in any case, aesthetics has been good to me. But in any case, it's just like when people would come back year over year, is Leslie here? They would come and see me. I built my own little book of business.
Absolutely.
Because I would anticipate. I'd be like, I set aside these Tom Fords just for you.
Right. Yep.
I had it written in their file, folks.
But no, whether you wrote in the file or remembered it, either way, right? It makes that person feel valued, right?
It does.
If you think of, a real estate broker or a hairstylist, like we are in the relationship business. When you find people, they want to stick with you and stick with you for life, so that you can't underestimate something like that.
Exactly. And then, what I want to ask you about too is, inside the brand. 'Cause I know I love the post that you put up the other day about, you're not a consultant or because, there's a lot of people who say,
don't call me that.
Don't call me that. And you're like, I'm not gonna. But it's like, there's so many people that say, I'm a consultant. I do this and that and this and that. We all know, but we're not going to name any names. But we know many establishments that say they do everything under the sun. And I'm like,
what do you do well, right? Like,
I'm like, and so, but here's something. How does brand touch upon, we talked about retention, the employee journey. And I think this is something that's not talked about enough in brand, because your team is your brand delivery system. Because at the end of the day, we're the head, but the people that we employ to deliver our thoughts out to the world are the system. And so every patient touch point is actually a people touch point,
Absolutely.
right? So how do you help a practice translate their brand positioning into actual behavior of their humans working in the front desk, doing the consultation, writing those texts?
Yeah. So there's a few elements to that. One element is going to be training. I don't think most practices train their team anywhere near enough, right? Training is like going to the gym. You don't just train your staff on customer experience once. You don't just train your team on conversion once. That's something you're doing monthly, bi-weekly, at the very minimum quarterly. But I think that's not anywhere near enough, right? But like, if you look at any brand, again, in or out of our world that consistently has the happiest customers, that converts the best, they train their team incessantly, right? So number one is definitely going to be leaning into your team training. Number two is going to be frameworks. And notice I did not say scripts. I think a lot of people scripting is like a loaded word, and like that's where you're like saying word for word what someone has to repeat, and that is going to stress your staff out. It's going to come across unnatural and robotic. It's just not going to work. So rather than give someone a word for word script, give them a framework. What is step one in this conversation? What are keywords you need to hit on? What is step two in this process? Keywords you need to hit on. So I think between frameworks versus scripts and making sure training is not just something you do every so often, but something that's just a natural day-to-day part of your culture of being part of your team, I think those two things can make a world of difference in making it tangible. And secret shop your own practice, right? Make sure you're auditing yourself on a regular basis. Where are you doing really well? Where are you missing the mark, right? And everyone has an off day. We're all human, but understand like you need to consistently gauge how you're doing, because it's the only way you're going to be able to have the awareness to allow you to improve consistently and over time.
Yeah, 100%. And so with that, if a practice owner can't articulate their brand clearly to like a new hire in the first week, what chance does that new hire actually have of delivering it properly to the patient?
Slim to none. I know that's like very, for those of you who don't know how to articulate, you can get there. It's a process, but you can get there. But right, that's kind of just like putting that person out to sea, especially if they're brand new to the world of aesthetic medicine, right? I believe, in the world of aesthetics, for someone who's never worked in this space before, I believe it's a 6-month learning curve with a bare minimum to truly understand this game and how the patient journey works and what it's all about. That first week or two truly makes or breaks there. I know very successful practices that when they have a new hire come on board, that person doesn't actually start their job for 2 weeks. Their first 2 weeks are just entirely shadowing to learn every nuance of that patient experience, every nuance of how things are done correctly, so that they feel empowered. And again, don't just put someone off to see by themselves 2 weeks in on day 15, right? Make sure they have plenty of time to, do things alongside a tenured staff member, plenty of time to do things alongside someone else to really build that confidence. And I understand every practice is different situations will warrant different needs, and it's not always going to be the most possible, but aim to keep that onboarding as in-depth and robust as possible, so someone by that second, third week can start to be independent, but make sure if it's all possible, don't just send them out to the, shark's den anywhere sooner than that.
Well, exactly, because imagine, because I've heard it, it's sitting in a practice and, someone calls, they're like, oh, do you do this service? They have a machine sitting there that does something exactly like the machine that the person's calling about.
Yeah.
But they just say, no, we don't, like Jamaicans say, we not have that.
Wait, what?
They just hang on the phone, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, but if they understood a little bit more from a didactic standpoint, some of the industry, so if you have certain machines in your practice or what have you, or products, you need to know if someone's calling even give them a cheat sheet. We have this. If someone calls and asks for this is what's kind of equivalent. And tell people to talk about the outcome. Oh, so you're calling about this machine. Are you looking to help with skin laxity under your neck?
Yeah.
Oh, and keep on going deeper into that, right? But that is not day 1 stuff. That's not even day 2
That's like week
stuff.
3 stuff at best, right? It takes time.
Best.
And you just touched on something really, really important. I think one little gem of wisdom for all of our listeners to really take back to their front desk is their job is also to get curious, right? If someone calls asking, do you offer X? Or how much do you charge for Y? Not just like barking a price back at them like a parrot, right? But like getting really curious. Yeah, I'd love to tell you more about our pricing. What made you curious about that treatment? What are we looking to minimize or improve upon today? Are you going to a practice right now? Like, get really curious about who's on the other end of that conversation so we can build a relationship with them, get to know their needs. And that's going to be by the time they walk through your doors, you are already that much more equipped to sell them what's right for their, target outcomes, because you have had that conversation in the first place versus someone who just gave a price, told them what to schedule, and they walk on in. So absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah, because when you do that, you start building that relationship with the patient. Soft notes, what I talked about. Then, even if you need to do it at the end of the day, and I think sometimes because the phones are ringing, because many people don't put their front desk in the back, and that's another conversation we're not going to talk about today.
Yeah.
But in any case, and so they're trying to triage people coming in, people calling on the phone. But like, have a beautiful notepad branded for your people, and just write down little things about each person they talked to who actually made an appointment, not just people who are kicking. Then put it in the soft notes. Yeah. And so then that starts that little type of patient, sorry guys, my brain's not working right now. Patient happiness. What's the word? It starts
really creates surprise and delight from the outset, right?
From the outset. It's like, wow, like I didn't even talk to you, nurse so-and-so. How do you know that? Yeah. But it started with that front desk of the patient concierge person getting curious, as you said. Absolutely. And I think that's so awesome. So if you don't take anything from this podcast, help your team to remain curious, and you remain curious first to keep that going. Yeah. And, and so kind of going into, fractional CMO lens, right? Because because guys, you might be wondering, what is a fractional CMO, right? So fractional chief marketing officer. So, let's talk about that. So most practice owners think that they need more marketing. You come in as a fractional CMO. What do you actually find that they need? What's the real diagnosis under the we need more leads presenting complaint? Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a reason my username on Instagram is Adam Loves Branding, right? So often a marketing problem is actually a brand positioning problem in disguise, right? Because if you're like, our Facebook ads aren't converting, or we just did this whole, paid media campaign and it didn't go the way we wanted, or we did an event and it flopped, right? Like, what was the message underpinning that, right? That's what we need to start looking at, because again, if your marketing message and your brand position is not dialed in, any ad spend you put out there is going to be just like pushing a boulder up a hill. It's never going to convert the way it should because it's not targeted to a specific enough message, right? So we always start there. And then I think another thing I see with so many practices we walk into is, practices are just doing too much, right? Like, we're doing Facebook ads and social media, and we're doing this referral program, and we do this thing with like referrals in the community, and we're doing this whole thing with like billboards. I'm like, whoa, like, do less better, right? You don't need to market your practice like 12 different ways. You need to market your practice like 3 or 4 ways and do them all really, really well
Yes.
versus things executed half measure, right? So I think if like I could summarize my whole philosophy to marketing in like, I don't know, 7 or 8 words, it would be do less better and do more of what works. And what works for practice A may not at all be what works for practice B. We have clients who are very, very heavily skewed towards paid marketing and organic SEO and digital avenues, and that works phenomenally for them. We have practices where they've built quite literally a $5 or $6 million practice with a GoDaddy website because word of mouth has really been their main avenue. Now, I'm no fan of GoDaddy websites, but that's what they came to me with. What I'm saying is one size never fits all for marketing. You find what works well for you, not just because you see a competitor across town doing it, thinking you need to hop on that bandwagon too, right? Like the new thing is AEO and answer engine optimization, and that absolutely matters. And, you know, by the way, a lot of what's really good for answer engine optimization is just good SEO with a new name on it. It's not radically different in my opinion. But that being said, like, you know, that just because everyone else is hopping on that, like, be aware of it, but it doesn't mean to go throw your whole marketing spend at that because it's the hot new thing. Like, what works well for you?
Yeah, I have to agree with that 100%. With that, what is the difference between a practice that's ready for a fractional chief marketing officer and one who isn't? Because I do think, you know, because you and I work in a similar way in that point, there is a readiness threshold.
Absolutely.
Right? And so tell me more about that.
So I like to call this the ceiling of clinical excellence. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of very, you know, first step kind of things you can do to grow your practice. Get some good word of mouth going with your first 250, 500 patients, right? At the very beginning, you may choose to do some paid ads on Meta or Google or whatever avenues you so choose, right? All that, you know, kind of step one marketing and being good at what you do in word of mouth is only going to get you so far. In my experience, it can get you, you know, when you really push that to its maximum, to about 2 million in revenue. At that point, all of a sudden, it's no longer about doing more. It's about really looking at more of a strategic conversation and what avenues are going to get us to the next level of brand awareness and what brand is going to get us to that next phase in our practice growth trajectory. So I think there's, again, those very kind of first step things that maybe a simple digital marketing professional or digital marketing agency can help you with to get that momentum going. And then at that level of, you know, 2 million or so, where you're like, yeah, we're great at what we do. We've got happy patients, but this has only gotten us to this level. We can't break it. That plateau, that ceiling, that's where that kind of fractional CMO conversation really starts to come into play, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, and I agree with that, just because you need someone to be looking at things in a holistic way. Because many times what we see is like, you know, someone's like, okay, if you compare it to like the practice, I'm really good at injecting, you know, Restylane. This is not an ad. But like, I'm really going to do this, and I'm only going to do this, and I'm not going to talk to you about skincare. I'm not going to talk to you about this. I'm not, and you're only in focus on injecting that one thing. And I think that's what happens. Social media companies come in. They're really good at social media marketing, but social media marketing is not branding.
No.
It is an offshoot. It's the baby of branding.
Absolutely. You know, I think social media is great.
It's amazing.
I mean, social media is how we connected, right? Social media is wonderful. But I look at social media, you know, as like a retention and relationship building tool, right? We know like upwards of 68% of board certified plastic surgeons have experienced a shadow ban at some point, right? We know that Meta does not like our industry, right? So whether we're talking about social media or SEO or paid ads or any one channel, like one is the most dangerous number in marketing, right? Because let's just say, you know, Instagram all of a sudden got banned tomorrow. How many practices would have lost their entire way of acquiring patients, right? That is no marketing plan. Whereas a fractional CMO can help you look at where and how to use which channels and to what extent. So I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah. And even with that too, and, you know, and I talk about this sometimes, I do think that we're even kind of going back to more analog methods of life, right?
Oh, there's a wealth of data on this. Even luxury brands are shifting massive amounts of their ad spend from all these digital channels that were really popular in mid-late 2010s, all the way to, you know, about 2 years ago, to really more offline activations. I call like we're in the interaction and ingenuity era because, I mean, we've got Claude and ChatGPT now. All of a sudden, you know, it used to be like, oh, well, we're just going to do more SEO blog posts on our website. We're just going to send out more email marketing. We're going to do more of this digital thing and more posts. Well, guess what? Everyone has that advantage now. So all of a sudden, we're surrounded by like a flood of AI slop that, you know, we can't tell one good provider from who's not so great. And how can we really break through all that noise? It's getting offline and doing things the old analog way. So I cannot agree more.
Yeah, because it's like, I find people, they want more of that tactile in-person experience. They want to see, touch, feel the energy.
Absolutely.
And you can't really do that online. It's like, I'm on LinkedIn. Much
you can
like
amplify it
You
online.
can amplify it,
But absolutely.
Yeah, and I do feel like, for the next 10 years, because it's going to get worse, guys. Like, you know, you think it's quiet now on social media, it's going to get worse. I do think social media more, like you were talking about, is more like, almost like it's a proof of concept. It's
Absolutely.
your storefront. It's like, it's where your, it's almost like a book, guys. It's like where your lookbook of patient things live, you
Yeah.
know? And so I think the era that we were in when people were dancing and doing all the
The
nonsense.
exposure era, as I call it, right?
Yeah, the exposure era. And I saw somebody recently, they lost about $500,000 overnight. The bot era is over now too, guys.
Yeah.
Because, you know, these meta and things are cracking down on it, right?
Platforms are cracking down,
Yep.
right? We now know more than half of all traffic online is actually bots, both
Yep.
on and off of social media, right? And if we look at like terms like digital detox retreat, right? And things about, if we look about like how that search traffic is raising among the affluent, it's up over 50%. So people are trying to get back to, like you said, that really tactile, offline, analog way of doing things and building relationships. And again, this is not about like a hate conversation
No,
on
not
online
at all.
marketing
Not at all.
What I
It's
am
important.
saying is too many practices have literally tried to hide behind a smartphone or hide behind a website versus like getting out there and getting to meet people.
Yeah, and I think you have to do that. And I know I was talking to a practice founder the other day, and she's in San Diego, and she was like, I did a wellness retreat
I
with
love
my
it.
top 25 patients. I was like, get it, girl. And she
Yeah.
had some really great speakers come in. But guess what's going to happen when you do that? Those 25 top patients are
Yeah.
going to tell their friend, where were you this Saturday, Laura? Oh my God,
Absolutely.
let me tell you over a glass of wine.
And that content's going into social media anyways, right?
That
So you're
part.
getting user-generated content from it. So I
That
love that.
part. And I think we're removing that, and that I think that's why it's so important to have someone that's overlooking your brand
Absolutely.
from the top strategic level and say, I am synthesizing all the things that are coming in this market right now,
Yeah.
but I'm going to make it make sense for your practice.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
you can be the atelier or for your little niche, for your little
Absolutely.
area, right?
I love that.
So, and then, so bigger picture, you know, we're both watching the same industry, right?
Yep.
So practices are getting squeezed from every direction, from other injectors, from competition, private equity roll-up groups,
Sure.
you know, patients who are more educated because of all these AIs, but they're also more
Educated in air quotes, but go on.
Yeah. But they're more price sensitive than ever. So what does a practice that survives the next 5 years look like? And what are they doing now that others aren't?
I think a few things. Number one, like we've just kind of harped on for the last, number of minutes, is really doubling down on your brand and differentiation. That's going to be so important. It's always been important in marketing. It's never mattered more. I think number two is really honing in on who your audience is, what patients you want to serve. And it's not just that, 30 to 55-year-old affluent women in the, that's like who everyone's going after, right? Who are underserved markets in your community who maybe aren't doing a lot of sections right now that are open to it, right? Maybe it's certain age demographic, maybe it's men, maybe it's a gender diverse population, maybe it is a certain type of condition that you were really good at mitigating for patients that your competitors aren't, right? That's going to look different for every single one of you. But really understanding who you can serve that every practice isn't going after right now, that can make a world of difference. I think the other thing is all of us in the industry are talking about this, but I think it can't be said enough, is moving away from just being aesthetics to really understanding that all these things make people look better is really just part of a bigger global picture as far as it concerns wellness and longevity, and making sure in some way, shape, or form your practice also has offerings that move in that direction. Because we see from actually data from Boston Consulting Group, if we look at the affluent population worldwide, spending, good news, in aesthetics is up. Happy day. In many sectors it's down. In aesthetics it's actually up. But where it's way up is in the world of wellness, longevity, biohacking, and things of that nature. And so I think it would be a bit remiss to not make sure your practice is cognizant of that trend and gradually moving certain services over in that direction as well.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And then final question. Okay. So I ask this to everyone. So what do you know now that you wish that you had knew when you started Aesthetic Altitude 12 years ago?
I think I say this with so much encouragement in my heart, the amount of work it is to build a brand properly in the world of medical aesthetics. It's not just, let's put on some snazzy new logos and redo our website and raise all our prices by double. Like, that is not building a luxury brand. There's a lot more to it than that. That's why people like you and I have, careers in this profession, right? It is something that I think truly takes, whether it's at the beginning, whether it's later on in the journey, truly takes some level of support and expert guidance to create. Because again, you and I, we are not clinicians. I don't know how to inject. I don't care to know how to inject. It's not what I put on this planet too. Conversely, medical professionals don't get a class on marketing or branding or all of this as they're learning their skill set, right? So I think just knowing you don't have to be the master in marketing. You don't have to be the marketing expert. If it's interesting, you want to learn about it, go for it, right? But really understand, stay in your zone of genius, stay in your area of unique ability, be that master clinician, be that expert. And when the time is right, whether it's the beginning or further down the trajectory, understand you can really get that support to build luxury brand, because it truly takes a village, right?
Yeah.
So that would probably be my biggest aha moment, compared to maybe when I worked in other industries, like very B2B oriented sectors, like an accounting firm or a construction firm. Like that was very much like a tactical ABC, here's your new brand, visual identity, and website. In our world, there's so much more to it because it's so much more of a relationship business.
Yeah, I understand that a lot. So, all right, guys. Well, Adam, this has been a wonderful conversation.
Such a delight.
And I know it's going to bring so much value. Guys, all of his information is going to be in the show notes. And make sure you get his book. I think you have 2 out now.
I have 4, but my newest one is
Let's go.
We aren't playing around here. It's No New Patients, and
Yeah.
you can get that at nonewpatientsbook.com.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank
Until next
you.
time.
Want more clarity like this? Join the Branded Practice newsletter community. I write about strategy, systems, and brand leadership straight to your inbox. Go to diamondhandsmedia.com to sign up. And if this episode hit, share it with someone still building without a brand. This is the Diamond Hands Podcast. Thanks for listening. Now go lead.